This season on the art and science of complex sales, we're thrilled to present Tales from the Frontlines, a season developed for the leaders shaping the future of complex sales. We're bringing you straight into the action with the C-suite, VPs of sales, sales development experts, and top-performing sales execs who are redefining success in the B2B world. These are the trailblazers that are tackling tough sales cycles, coaching sales champions, and aligning teams to deliver exceptional results. So join us as we unpack the hard lessons, the breakthrough moments, and the invaluable insights from the best in the business. It's more than a podcast, it's a guide to growing revenue with confidence. So let's get started. Hey everybody, let's get going. Today we are joined by Matt Green. Matt is CRO of Sales Assembly. They're a unique organization in the realm of sales training. They're helping GTM organizations grow better, faster, and smarter, and they're doing it through strategic skill development, peer communities, and a great learning platform. Matt himself is bringing a wealth of expertise in scaling teams and driving success, mainly as a part of successful experience leading sales and operations for high-growth tech companies. In today's episode, we're diving into the skills that sales teams need today and where they're lacking. Most importantly, I completely missed the opportunity to challenge him to a game of The Simpsons trivia, so maybe next time, Matt. We're going to have to get that going. Let's get started with Matt Green. Matt Green, welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. How are you?
I'm good, Paul. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited about this. I'm really pumped to have it, and here's why. Because we're talking about what's going on the front line to sales. And I don't know who would be much better to do that than the CRO of an organization that sells to VPs of sales and CROs about how to help people on the front lines of sales. So I'm really pumped about this and feel like you're going to be bringing a whole lot of knowledge about what's going on out there right now. So do you mind giving people just a quick 30-second minute of who you are, what you do, and how you got into this?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me. So Matt Green, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder of a company called Sales Assembly. What Sales Assembly does, as you alluded to a moment ago, is we provide all the day-to-day skills training for the go-to-market teams of a few hundred as of today, B2B technology companies. And where we sit in the ecosystem is, we're not coming into companies and instituting a sales process or a methodology. Our whole thesis is that regardless of the product you sell or who you sell it to, if you're an AE, a BDR, a CSM, an account manager, there are some core skills and competencies, things like negotiation, storytelling, multi-threading, qualification, that are consistent from company to company. That's the kind of stuff that we focus our day-to-day training on. And yeah, to your point, we sell pretty much exclusively to the VPs of sales and CROs of all these B2B tech companies that we work with. And we also tend to keep really close relationships with them. We have a few different formats on a monthly basis where we bring these revenue leaders together just to give them the opportunity to chat with their counterparts regarding what's working and what's not working in their respective world. So yes, hopefully I'm going to be able to bring a little bit of like this bird's eye view kind of perspective to the conversation today.
Well, and you just had one today, if I'm not mistaken. It's you have a CRO roundtable, right? That you run. Is that every month or every 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's every month. The third Thursday of every month. There's maybe around 300 CROs and VPs of sales that are part of the group, but depending on the day, there's anywhere between 25 to 50 of these folks on at any given time, and it's $10 million companies, $10 billion companies, and everything in between. So really good sample size of different types of folks.
Well, let's dive in then in terms of it, because I love the approach, and we've talked about how you all execute that. But one of the things that fascinates me is that you're focusing on the core skills for the AEs, SDRs, BDRs, and what they are. So what is going on in the world of frontline tech sales, and what are some of the key critical skills that people are that right now that they're looking at getting people trained on? Is it different than before? Is it the same?
Yeah. What we've seen over the past couple quarters is an increased reliance. If I had to pick two skills off the top of my head, number one would be multi-threading. right? And reason being is because, we've gone through this shift, and we, the collective, the entire tech ecosystem, since, we hit a little bit of turbulence financially in 2023, we've gone through this shift where, essentially what used to be any sort of mid-market sale, you're now operating in more of like an enterprise sales motion, because buying committees are so much larger, budgets are so much smaller, and it's that much more difficult in order to affect a $30,000 sale as it was maybe compared to 2 or 3 years ago, right? So multi-threading and teaching these enterprise sort of sales motions and competencies to individuals that prior to late 2023 or early 2024 didn't really need them in order to be successful. That's been a big priority. Second would be just general storytelling, right? And, we're seeing this a lot on both the sales and the post-sales side of the house. On the post-sales side, as more and more organizations are taking a look at their CSM teams and saying like, hey, we need to start maybe assigning expansion revenue quotas to you. And it can't just be all about retention. We need to find, upsell opportunities. And also we want to make sure that we're not creating an environment where, as you're identifying those opportunities, you have to necessarily kick these opportunities over to an account executive so that he or she would be able to close it. It's about empowering these post-sales teams in order to become more like salespeople, for the lack of a better term, and storytelling is a critical part of that.
I would assume that that multi-threading and storytelling are going hand in hand for those CS teams as well. It definitely, in terms of the account growth, have you seen, working in the landscape of the tech companies, have you seen, I know what I've seen personally, talking to a bunch, but did you see 2023 and 2024 as kind of the year of churn? Was it one of those things where it was tougher to grab clients and then just as tough to keep them?
Yes. In a short answer, yes, unequivocally. 2023 was a big churn year for everybody across the board. 2024 was noticeably better, but it seemed like everyone, at least for the first half of 2024, was kind of walking on eggshells, right? So still, a decent amount of churn and, consolidation when it came to tools and tech and platforms within organizations. That started changing maybe around June or July in 2024. Once, everyone who seemed to have been waiting for the next recession, which was just around the corner and just about to start any day now for about a year and a half. Once that didn't happen, everyone sort of collectively at the same time said like, okay, well, I guess there's no recession coming. Therefore, the current economic environment that we're operating in is going to be pretty representative of what we could expect over the next 2 to 3 years. Therefore, we could start planning, right? And we could plan with these as our benchmarks. And as long as organizations are able to plan, that's when they're able to either make new investments or maybe a little bit more generous when it comes to, okay, we need to maybe retain some of these existing tools that we have rather than cutting them all together, just sort of in a mad dash to make sure that we're trimming our spend.
And what did you see in terms of retention and turnover of sales teams over the course of that time period in tech? Is that something, I know you help a whole lot with that when you're giving the skills trainings and that type of stuff. Did you notice any patterns? Was there some with the companies that you're running and the CRO roundtables and that type of stuff?
Yeah, it was 2023, if we could all remember back, what was pretty tough for employee retention. A lot of companies made some pretty significant cuts to staff. Interestingly, when you talk about trends or just, highlights of that, there seemed to have been 2 job titles or 2 profiles that not only weren't really that dramatically impacted, but they always, to an extent, remained in relatively high demand. And number one, that was enterprise salespeople, right? People that have demonstrated experience selling into the enterprise. And that was due in large part because a lot of companies around the same time said like, okay, crap, we can't rely on selling into these smaller, medium-sized companies anymore. We need to start moving up market. Therefore, it's going to become more critical that we have folks on the team that are competent at that type of motion. That and revenue operations professionals, right? And even to this day, when we get pinged by companies that we work with, they're saying like, hey, we're looking to staff up our enterprise AE team, or hey, we're looking for a director, VP level RevOps leader. They're extremely hard to find, right? Because they're getting compensated well, they're in a good spot. Maybe they're pretty hesitant to jump roles right now. And there's just not that many of them that are out there on the open market.
Well, and you saw one of the things that got crushed over that time period. I'm wondering if you're seeing it come back, or is the SDR and the work on that is that SDR, or that almost the full cycle rep, but just the one that didn't handle the complex sale as much, the churn and burn type. How are you seeing that come back? Are you seeing AI have an impact? What's going on in terms of the market?
Yeah, we saw when AI first really became, a big thing, we did see a lot of companies in sort of a reactionary way, because it coincided with the time it's like, hey, we got to cut staff anyway. Like, oh my God, why don't we choose AI to replace this SDR function, and let's just cut this SDR team. You saw a lot of companies, maybe about 6 months after the fact, say like, oh crap, that was a mistake, because number one, the AI, not only at the time, but easy to argue still to this day, isn't really that great, right? Folks like you and I, when we get an AI generated message, we could easily spot it, right? So, it's not really where it needs to be yet. Number two, because everyone started using AI, the entire space just got really noisy, right? So, very similar to, another demographic, enablement leaders, right? Where we saw these pretty deep cuts. We're starting to see those companies build those teams back up right now. But to the point that you're alluding to, not necessarily when it comes to SDRs, not necessarily bring them back in to do what they used to do in 2021, 2022, and early 2023, but especially these organizations that are selling into the enterprise or selling into the Fortune 1000, whatever the case may be, repurposing the role of the SDR and do maybe something that's more akin to an account planning SDR, where it's like, hey, I'm going to do all the stuff that AI can do. I'm going to do all the research, build in all the personalization. I'm basically going to do all the blocking and tackling, so that all the account executive has to do is what they're going to be best at and where their time is best spent, which is actually going to be selling, like in the meetings and actually selling. Anything else that doesn't have to do with actually affecting the sale, anything else that's on the periphery of that sales motion, that's what the SDRs are really taking the responsibility for right now.
So in your training, this is something I'm fascinated in your training, and especially with the organizations that do employ SDRs, what type of shift in skills training is happening there? Is it as much about the phone? Is it as much about social selling? Is it just about research? What type of skill sets are you finding that it's critical to train?
Yeah, it seems like the phone has made a really big resurgence, and it's always you're like preaching to the choir, right?
Yes.
It's always a moving target, because the things that make a resurgence, it's really just what people used to do that they stopped doing once something else became more attractive, right? In this case, okay, let's just put together email sequences, let's blast those out. That worked for a couple of years. Enter AI. Crap, this doesn't work anymore because everyone's getting blasted with emails. Okay, what are people not doing? They're not hopping on the phones, right? So let's get people more trained and upskilled and hopping on the phones. And you see more and more teams having success with cold calling. And as a result, you see all these really amazing platforms like Nooks that are taking off and doing extremely well, because they're providing a solution that's going to just, essentially 10x the capabilities of someone who's making cold calls day in and day out. So I would say that would absolutely be a big thing that we've seen a resurgence on it. Yeah, also social selling is something that I think many companies haven't really figured out how to crack doing it well. They think that social selling is just, okay, we're going to put ads somewhere on a platform like LinkedIn, or we're just going to cut and paste our, company marketing department approved content and case studies and throw that up on LinkedIn, thinking that works, when that's not really that effective. So the type of training that we're doing, again, getting super tactical, is rather than just like, hey, here's how to cold call. It's like, no, let's focus on cold call openers, right? During one specific session, because that is going to be the hook. Are these people going to give you the time of day? Really going to be dependent on that first 5 or 10 seconds once you start interacting with them. And then social selling. Okay, how do you leverage platforms like LinkedIn to build relationships and build credibility, so that when you go in to make that cold call or send that cold email after the fact, the prospect's going to be a little bit more responsive to you and a little bit more open to maybe taking a meeting.
So let's talk about that one. Let's talk about one particular skill you talked about, that cold call opening. How much has that shifted? Like for those of you that are not watching this, Matt looks a little bit younger than I do. so you look a little bit young. I don't know if you are. Filters, yeah. We've been in the game for a while, right? So what has the shift been? Or has there even been one? Are you just going back to basics when people are talking about cold call openings like we did 25 years ago? Or is this something completely new and revolutionary that you're needing to teach people every day?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's, I think revolutionary would be too strong a term. I could tell you that, yes, back in my day, when I was making, 300, 350 cold calls a day, the standard was, hey, Paul, it's Matt Green. I'm calling from so-and-so. Do you have a minute? Right. And then, these days it was like, no, I mean, don't use the permission-based openers, right? Because everyone's, Paul's going to say, no, I don't have a minute, right? I know there's a cold call, right? So, but to answer your question in short, rather than focusing on like, hey, here's one thing that works, what we see is a lot of companies having success with a variety of different tactics. Whereas, one company, one team, or maybe even one individual might have success with just, hey, Paul, I'm Matt Green, and they just go straight into their pitch and try to cram as much as possible into that first 5 or 10 seconds. You have some people that have success where it's like, hey, Paul, it's Matt Green, this is a cold call. Or do you want to hang up now? Or, do you want to kind of give me, 5, 10 seconds to tell you why I'm calling? So again, that we see that varying from company to company. And what we tend to spend our time training on is what we believe, again, based on our vantage point, the best ways to affect both. That permission-based, non-permission-based, that sort of humorous, like, okay, well, oh my God, there's a cold call. I mean, don't hate me. Those types of openers, and really, see how they fit within the broader, just sort of cold outreach scheme within your organization.
So given all the tools, the time-tested ones, the new ones, having fun. One of the things that I've seen come up recently, and I don't know the guy, but I follow him on LinkedIn, a guy named Dale Dupree. I love his extremely creative openers and I like going back to that. I like going back to the, and reps, it seems like, are really embracing that type of creativity too, and getting in the door. I remember my favorite things that we ever did it was my second sales gig, and it was for a security company, and we sell IT security. And so my buddy figured out this IT security. These guys love t-shirts. They would wear them anywhere. And he just got a big thing printed that said security on the front and had a quote from The Art of War on the back. Right. So complete security geek thing. Right. And so, it cost us $10 to make a t-shirt and $5 to put it in a package, and we got it out there. We got more meetings from that type of stuff than I'd ever seen. And I actually see some of that physical stuff making a comeback. I guess the question I'm driving to, there is one in here, is the physical stuff, the person to person, the getting together, the actual stopping by and dropping by. Are you seeing any sort of resurgence in that?
Yeah, so physical stuff, gifting using platforms like Sendoso, 100%. But yes, the other really big thing that we've seen that really kicked off again, maybe in Q1, Q2 of last year, and still extends to this day, is the mad dash to get in person, right? Whether it is emails or calls or social selling, it's, again, given the prevalence of AI, it is natural for buyers to just like, look, that's all noise, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you want to break through the noise, you got to break through the screen. How do you do that? With physical gifting, and again, with finding ways to meet people in person. So, the in-person variety, and again, we've been talking a lot about this within these monthly peer groups that we do, and this is full transparency. A big source of success for sales assemblies is doing things in person throughout the year. On the very front end of the sales cycle, it could just of course not only attending industry conferences and things like that, but doing small micro events around those conferences. Where we see a lot of folks leveraging in person is actually midway through the sales cycle. And they do it for two reasons. Number one, to try to, of course, edge out any competitors, but also number two, really to qualify the health of an opportunity, right? Because if you're midway through, a six-figure sales cycle, and I reach out to you, Paul. Let's say I'm trying to sell into you, and I say, hey, Paul, by the way, going to be in town, would you mind if I stop by the office? Hey, it'd be great to meet you and the team. And while I'm there, we can talk about this, that, or the other thing that is part of the conversation that we're having anyway. If you say no to that, right, then I'm going to go back and go, okay, well, is this deal really on track anyway? If Paul won't even take the time to meet me in person. So we do see a lot of really mature and professional organizations like sort of strategically throwing out the idea of in-person meetings, not only as a way, again, to break through the noise by breaking through the screen and build relationships in person, but also just as importantly, qualify the health of some of the opportunities that are maybe moving their way towards the later stages of a sales cycle.
Do you find a lot of organizations with that in person now coming back in need of some massive training upgrades around that and some skills?
Yeah, it's funny. We did. I'll never forget this. And granted, it's about a year and a half, 2 years old now. But one of the companies that we're working with, the leader came to us and said, like, hey, this was, maybe mid 2022. It's like, okay, vaccines are rolling out. Everyone's back in person. Let's allocate budget for not only our salespeople, but our customer success. Let's have them go on the road and start meeting clients and prospects in person. And they were getting a lot of resistance from the team, people dragging their feet, that they're not booking travel, not booking flights. And the leaders presumed that this was due to like, okay, well, they're worried about work-life balance. They don't want to be on the road, all those understandable things. But after digging a little bit deeper, they realized that across the team, there was a significant level of just stress and anxiety from the reps. And why? Because they never done it before, right? They were hired in 2018, 2019, right? Maybe as SDRs. 2020, they get promoted into account executives or CSMs. Then they go virtual, right? And then, for pretty much all their professional career, they've been doing this just on Zoom, and they did not, as weird as it might sound to older folks like you and I, they did not know how to take clients out to dinner, right? How to entertain, 5 decision makers in a physical room for an hour and a half, right? And even small things like, hey, Paul, if your meeting is at 10 o'clock, right, and you're heading to a prospect's or a client's office, you're pulling up Uber. Don't have the Uber arrive at 9:57. Like, no, arrive at 9:30, make sure that, go through security, check and make sure that you're 10, 15 minutes, or like really small things like that you and I would like smile about, like, okay, this is common sense. When you think about it, they'd never done that stuff before, right? So it did take a lot of coaching on. It's like, okay, here are just some of the core basic best practices of taking clients, taking prospects out to a social event, right? And not having everything confined to a 30-minute Zoom conversation.
Well, I tell you that gives me actually a ton of hope. I love the in-person coming back. It is so much fun to get out there and be with people. And the other thing is, I think it was so needed, right? It's just so critically needed. And you mentioned one thing that I had talked about, that rise of AI is going to force the interaction even more. So I'm wondering, have you found organizations that are really doubling down on that type of training? Like, let's really just dive in and get our team completely in person ready. And what are the things that they are doing to do that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We do see a lot, the companies that we see doing this. I mean, it's a lot of investment from a marketing spend perspective, because again, it has to do with trade shows, micro events, things of that nature. And from a training standpoint, like sure that there are some of the skills and competencies, again, things like storytelling, right? That the companies, we see them leveraging, but really it's more, to my point a few moments ago, as weird as it sounds, it's about expectation setting, right? I mean, I'm sure that we've all been to conferences where we're walking around the floor and we see the people manning the booths that are ostensibly meant to be salespeople, right? Trying to draw people like you and I in, but what are they doing? They're sitting there on their phones, right? Mm-hmm. So, again, just basic core expectations, something like that. Like, no, if you're going to this event, we're investing a whole lot of money into it. Here's how to act, right, during these hours that you're meant to be on the floor. And like, no, do not all, bundle up in, if there's 5 people from our organization at this event, do not all just sit there at the booth. It's like, hey, you two, you're responsible for going out and networking and actually working the floor. Whereas the other 3, you're going to hang back and man the booth and have your phones put away, on silent so that you can actually engage with the people that are walking by. So again, it's less about like, okay, we got to train you how to do this stuff, and more just about like setting pretty clear expectations as far as behaviors during the day of that type of event.
So I'm going to shift us real quick, because I want to make sure we don't miss out on something, Matt. I want to make sure that you're able to tell, you have a pretty cool story about how Sales Assembly started. I would love to dive into that a little bit. If you don't mind, again, kind of sharing how you guys got it off the ground, what you're doing currently, and then how some of the cool thing that you're doing with the CROs in market that are helping to educate and bring up the next group of, essentially the next group of sales experts, and the next group, they're elevating the sales profession. I really love that. I was wondering if you could just kind of give us a picture of that in a couple minutes and make sure that story is told. Yeah,
no, thanks for asking. So the genesis of this, which to be clear is my partner Jeff's idea. I got a job leading sales for a Series A tech company here in Chicago, maybe about a decade ago. And my partner, Jeff, was the first person that I hired onto my team over there. And we were building sales teams across the country. And as sales leaders at a tech startup, one of the things that we did is we just put together a really informal bi-monthly coffee meeting with the heads of sales of what at the time were other Chicago-based early-stage tech companies like Sprout Social, G2, Spot Hero, ShipBob, Active Campaign, so on and so forth. And we would all come together and we'd really just like, hey, what are you working on? What are you struggling with? Like, how are you handling this? How are you handling that? And that was just like a really good support group where we learned a lot and, try to provide, as much value as we could to the other individuals that were part of this bi-monthly coffee meeting. But then, you fast forward maybe about 2 years after that, both my partner and I impacted by a riff at the organization that we worked with. We just candidly had a decision to make. It's like, okay, do we go find W-2 roles? And it's like, go do this over again. Or it's like, hey, we have all these sales leaders that we're meeting with on pretty much a monthly basis, and all their companies sell different products to different people, but they're all complaining about the exact same stuff, right? And those complaints tended to revolve around, number one, a lack of community and connectivity for them as leaders, right, which we're providing, but also number two, a lack of time, and more specifically, a lack of time to train their BDRs on things like objection handling or train their AEs on things like negotiation, right? So we said, okay, why don't we start offering solutions to all these things you all keep complaining about? That eventually became what Sales Assembly is today. So we've been doing this. July will be 8 years that we've been on this journey.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And it's just finding a niche and something you're passionate with and going for it. And then one of the things that does fascinate, I don't know if you're able to talk about it, about the model though, is some of the people that you have to come in and then be able to provide content. You're not just creating content off the street and having people do it. You're people that are actually out there getting things done on a day-to-day basis, as leading sales organizations or feet on the street AEs are coming in to help you do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we leverage the ecosystem that we built of a few hundred B2B tech companies today to benefit the ecosystem that we built. So yes, at a very granular level, Sales Assembly, we're facilitating anywhere between 5 to 7 live training programs every week. So we're doing 300 to 400 throughout the course of any given year. The vast majority of these are going to be facilitated by other operators from across the ecosystem. So rather than, having someone, God forbid, like me, build and facilitate, a 50-minute session on multi-threading within enterprise level accounts, right? Like, no, let's bring in Lisa Honecker, who is the, VP of sales and account management at HighSpot, right? Someone that does this for a living, that has been doing this for a living for years. Let's have her come in and not only bring a sense of relevance and credibility, right, on the topic, which candidly is something that I don't have in that type of situation, but just as importantly, unlike bringing in sales consultants or something like that, as a current actual operator, she's going to be able to lead a session on multi-threading and say, not only here's what I did, but more importantly, I'm still in the role today, right? So here's what I'm doing today. And here's how that differs from maybe what worked for me a quarter ago or 2 quarters ago. So it gives us the opportunity to make sure that the content that we're putting out there, because we are putting out a lot, is always progressive and always relevant, because it's always up to date, because we're always learning from people that are actually doing the job, as opposed to someone that wrote a book 10 years ago about the job that they did back in, the 2010s.
Nice. Well, it's a great way to build a community and then to leverage that expertise within it. And hats off, man. I think you're really doing a great job of impacting the next generation of tech sales and the current one too. So it's great work. It's great work. I loved learning about it. And the more I've checked it out, I just think it's a really, really cool model.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some you just don't get. It's extremely creative. It leverages great resources and it allows you to build a community. So, hats off. Last thing I will ask is, what is the last thing? So, Matt, is there anything that you want to leave? We're talking to thousands of sales execs right now. And VPs of sales. What is the one thing in 2025 that could be the most important thing for those sales execs or those sales leaders?
Yeah, I'd say, 2 things. Number one, going back to the sense of community or sense of an ecosystem, make sure that you as a leader find yourself something like that, but make sure that your reps have access to something like that as well, because it's just as, if not more important for them as it is for you. And number 2, and it's really just double clicking on a topic that we had earlier on in the conversation, presuming that you're just not operating in a very transactional sales environment. If you're selling anything that looks like mid-market or enterprise, find ways to meet people in person, right? That is going to be the big differentiator. Not many companies are doing it, and the companies that are doing it, not all of them actually really know how to do it effectively. So again, if you want to break through the noise, all the AI noise, the email noise, the phone call noise, try to break through the screen and find ways to meet your prospects and clients in person.
That's it. Well, thank you so much, Matt. I truly appreciate having you on the show today. You're always welcome back. This has been awesome, and I can't wait to keep telling the world about Sales Assembly and what you do. Everybody, I would check him out online. Matt, where do people find you online?
Everyone can find me on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with anyone there and see how I can be helpful in any way, shape, or form.
Fantastic. Well, take Matt up on that, everybody. With that, we'll end the show for today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, make sure you are clicking like, subscribe, and all those things that I'm supposed to tell you to click on those things so you get the next episode and hear more great guests like Matt. And keep shining bright, everybody. Have a great day. Hey, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. I hope today's conversation provided you with valuable insights and practical ideas to help you and your team elevate the profession and succeed in today's complex world. This podcast is brought to you by Membrane.com. Membrane is the B2B growth platform for CEOs, sales leaders, and sales executives who are committed to sustainable growth and change. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, like, subscribe, share it with your network. Your support really helps us bring more valuable insights from the best in the business straight to you. Also, check us out at Membrane.com. We're more than a technology. Membrane equips your teams with the expert coaches and trainers, amazing sales methodologies, process, people, and tools to continually improve and coach results. More than a CRM. It's a network, and it's designed to help your team execute with confidence, smash goals, and overall up your sales game. So we'll see you next time for another episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. And until then, as always, keep shining bright.